Welcome to another episode of Tea with Gregg C. For those who've been wondering, I'm drinking Earl Grey tea this morning, and thanks to everyone who's joining. So today we're talking about the security deposit. It is so crucial right now. As you can imagine, landlords are incredibly sensitive to this topic, given the pandemic and given what they've seen over the last few months with a number of tenants who have unfortunately not been able to make it through and have returned their spaces, leaving landlords saying, what am I to do? How much security did I have and why didn't I have enough? So it's incredibly top of mind. And tenants, of course, are saying, well, my working capital is so crucial to me. What do I need to think about with regards to security deposit as I move forward and take on new space? So I really first want to talk about security deposit and how someone calculates what that number is. A landlord is thinking about, in an initial move-in, getting to know their tenant, if they are in fact a good paying tenant, and how do they protect or securitize a number of their investments that they've made up front. There are transaction costs in getting a new tenant. Things like the free rent that they are offering up front as a concession, as well as the build out of space and the transaction costs of the commissions that are paid to not only the tenant representation, because remember, in every office leasing deal, it is the landlord that pays the tenant's tenant representation fee, but also their own representation fee. So all of those costs add up to a number, and a landlord thinking up front when he goes into signing a new lease, well, these are my upfront costs. How do I protect them in the case that a tenant goes under or isn't able to deliver their rent on time? And that's in the form of a security. So what we usually see is a larger number up front. And in fact, this came up this morning with a tenant saying, hey, I'm thinking about moving. How much should I be thinking about security? My response was 3 to 12 months. You can drive a truck through the spread of a security deposit determination. And that's a function of what are your financials as a company? What is the capital outlay of the landlord to the build out? What is the financial strength of the landlord themselves? All factors in making a decision. So yes, it's a negotiation, and yes, we also know that landlords don't want to lose potential tenants over security deposit. So it's a conversation that starts. It's the next question will be, well, is it cash, Gregg, or is there another form? Well, a letter of credit called an LC is the preferred form that a security deposit takes by landlords. And that's a function of what happens in a bankruptcy of a company. If it's cash, it is basically something that the lenders can go to in a bankruptcy. If it's a letter of credit, it's essentially ring fenced and cannot be touched. So it gives the landlord a greater sense of comfort of the protecting their security deposit, which is why they take the LC. For you as a tenant, what does it cost? It costs anywhere between 1% and 2% a year to your bank to get a letter of credit. And then the conversation goes to, what about a return of your money over time? And what I'm going to say to you is, there's something called a burn down of the security deposit. Imagine you were a landlord and you are getting comfort with your tenants. Are they able to pay on time? What's the longevity likely of them staying in their space? As you become a better paying tenant, meaning making your payments on time, the landlord may show a willingness, especially after a certain amount of time, to burn down your security deposit. If you don't ask for it, you're definitely not going to get it. So please do make sure that this is part of your negotiation. And by the way, this negotiation should take place when you're agreeing to the financial terms of your lease, not some point in the future when the leases have been drawn. But the point is, you can get, at some point, maybe it's 2 or 3 years on a 5-year lease, or maybe it's at the 5th year of a 10-year lease, or maybe it's on a 10-year lease, a return after 3 years and after 6 years. Sometimes it's a landlord saying, hey, I need to take a look at your financial health at that period of time. But what you need to remember is a burn down of a security deposit is something that should definitely be included in every lease negotiation that you have. And then separately from that, talking about the negotiation and the security deposit, recognize that you're going to have to provide financials to your landlord as part of this conversation. They're going to ask for, many instances, they ask for audited financials. Recognizing that they're talking to many tenants who do not have, they take unaudited financials. They'll ask for a P&L. They'll ask for a balance sheet over the last 2 years. But recognize that that's something that you should have at your ready to be able to deliver to a landlord as part of the conversation. And I always say, lead with it first, early, because they're more likely to reach for you if they see that you have strong financials. So that's what I wanted to talk about with regards to the burn down. And I'm just trying to think about what else we should be talking about with regards to security deposit. Start early, start the conversations up front. Recognize that while you think you have strong financials, what you may have as strong financials aren't necessarily the same in the eyes of a landlord. There's a difference between a $10 million net income business and an S&P 500 company and a $1 million net income business. So what may be strong for you and relative to your peers may not necessarily be in the eyes of the landlord. So I got a question from somebody participating saying, my biggest win for a tenant related to the security deposit, I would say one of my biggest wins was a landlord who asked for a good guy guarantee, which is essentially a limited liability guarantee, which means that you as the tenant are personally on the hook up until the point that you return the keys back to the landlord. Now that's created because the landlord just wants to make sure that you don't squat. So if you're not squatting and you return the keys and you give the keys back to the landlord and the space is in room clean condition, then you're off of that liability. So to get back to the question, I'd say my biggest win was giving a little bit more security to the landlord up front and removing the good guy guarantee and achieving two burn downs over the term of a 10-year lease, one at year 3 and one at year 7, where we started at 7 months of security, and by the end of year 6, we were down to two months of security. And on that point, this is another reason why you need to really work with somebody who can remember and remind you of your key dates. In many leases, it states that the security deposit will not be released until you take action and reach out to your landlord yourself to say, hey, landlord, it's the time in our lease where you owe me money. If you don't do that, they're going to hold on to that. And that, what I'd say, is one of the saddest stories I've heard is a tenant who I didn't work with initially on a lease. They were coming for a renewal after 10 years in the space. I looked at their lease, and they had put up 6 months security. They were supposed to get a burn down and money returned after 5 years, but they didn't reach out to the landlord. So the landlord had been holding on to 3 months of security for the last 5 years. Imagine what the return on that money would have been if it would have been in their pockets. So key dates are important. It's something that you can ask from your representative, your tenant representative, something that I do, to say to your tenants, hey, look, we're coming to a point of time where you can go to the landlord and ask for some of this money being returned. These are all just things that I think you should be thinking about, and why I love educating tenants about this part of the office leasing process. I know it's complicated. I'm trying to simplify it for you. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Gregg Cohen, and this was Tea with Gregg C. See you next week.